Defense shred. Why is everyone talking about it? How does this do more damage? The simple answer is it's an extra multiplier. Who doesn't want an extra multiplier in their damage? And it also has increasing returns to scale. Well, the two natural questions that follow are how much of a multiplier is it? How can I increase the return the scale does? Why does the scale increase returns? How come increases scale with return? Do the returns increase the scale? Is there a scale stat that can increase when I return it? These are not the right questions, but the better question is why are there increasing returns to scale? To dig into this a little better, we first have to figure out what is the actual formula for defense. And the formula for defense is based on the level differences when you're trying to deal damage, where A is the attacker level, which is what you are, and E is the enemy level. That last section is the defense reduction. These can come from all your defense shred sources, defense down, defense ignore. It all gets piled into this last variable right here. So this is the main stat that we're changing. But to simplify it, if we just consider the end game where A is your attacker level, you're putting yourself at level 80, and the enemy is at the highest content is level 95. You can adjust, but we're just going to use that, and it'll simplify down a little bit more into this. 1 divided by 1 plus 1.5 times defense, where defense is the amount of defense they have left after all the reductions and ignores. This formula for this multiplier is it's simpler, but it's still kind of hard to get a sense of, like, what does that actually mean? Luckily, we can actually just graph this. And if we consider, if they have full defense, that's all the way on the right, where their defense is 1. And the multiplier is like 0.465. If we shred all of their defense, you slowly move to the left, and that multiplier is 1. The difference between that is over 2. So your multiplier can go up to more than twice as much as it can be. That is how much is at stake with the defense multiplier. Then we talk about that's at stake. That's kind of multipliers. What about returns to scale? Well, returns to scale is we have returns, which is kind of like our output, but it's not fair to say it's like, oh, I got $100. Oh, what'd you do to get it? If you worked 100 hours, the returns to scale is pretty small. It's not worth it. It's not a good deal. Returns to scale compares the output to how much input you put in. Okay, so now that I have some idea of returns to scale, the thing I'm putting in is I'm putting in defense shredding, and what I care about is your damage output. But before we look into that, there are three kinds of returns to scale. Number one, there's constant returns to scale. Constant returns to scale is if you keep adding inputs, the same amount of outputs come out. You can imagine a vending machine. You put $1 in, you get a snack out. It doesn't matter how many dollars you add, you still keep getting that one, and you run it down through all the vending machines at that price. It could also be a decreasing returns to scale or diminishing returns to scale. This is often more common if you're eating those things. If you have to eat the first one, sounds good. Second one, yeah, all right. The third one, I'm kind of full. I don't really want it. And by the 10th one, you're leaving that on the ground. Each addition does not gain you gains you less and less happiness as you go down. Decreasing returns to scale are things to watch out for because you can only do it to a certain extent and then it's not as good. On the contrary, there are increasing returns to scale. Increasing returns to scale is something like a bulk discount. You know, buy 5, get 1 free. If you buy a larger family size pack, you get more than individually. So as you keep going up and up, you actually get it for a better and better deal. This is kind of the bulk discount idea. A lot of network effects have this. So as I keep adding inputs, the amount of output increases with each time I do it. So increasing returns to scale are the ones you want to, lean into more, because as you put it in, you get more. And as you put in even more, even more comes out. If we look at our graph of the defense shred, we start on the left. As you go, take a step over, you go up a little bit, which is great. I do like extra damage multipliers, but each step as you go to the left gets steeper and steeper. The defense shred is actually an increasing returns to scale, because as you go, you get more and more benefit out of it. So that's why everyone keeps talking about you gotta stack more defense shred. So some of the sources of defense reduction, you have Silverwolf's Talon Ultimate. Pela's Ultimate can also reduce it. The Quantum set itself can also defense shred, depending if they're quantum weak or not. Each one will have its own. The dot set has 6% for each dot that is applied, up to 3. The Resolution Light Cone is a great one for boosting damage. And Black Swan can also reduce the defense on the enemy. But with those defense shreds, how much extra damage do I actually do? Is it worth putting those defense shreds? I want to think about, if I put this on, how much extra damage do I do? Because I'm considering between a lot of things. Other support, other units, other light cones, other relic sets. What is the actual damage? So all of our decisions come back down to how much more outputted damage can I do? So the best way to do this is you compare. You have an initially they were at some defense, and then I'm considering, do I want to add this extra defense reduction? Let's see what our final defense is. So we have our initial defense, and it is reduced by X amount to get our final defense. So I want to compare our final defense multiplier, and I'm going to divide it by the initial defense multiplier. And considering this is how much extra damage we get from the defense reduction, where X is the amount of damage we've reduced it by, and DF is the final defense left on the enemy. You can see that the lower the defense left, the bigger our damage is, because the thing you're dividing by gets smaller and smaller as DF gets smaller and smaller. So if DF is really small, that means that each defense reduction is bigger and bigger. This is the idea of how we see that there are increasing returns to scale. So with this knowledge, you can actually consider Pela's Ultimate. It's doing 40% defense reduction on a fresh enemy. Should I bring her on the team? How much extra damage can I expect putting Pela on the team? Well, this 40% defense reduction is how much it changes by. And then the second thing I need to know is, what's the final defense? Well, it went from 100 down to 60, so it's 0.6. And so our extra damage increase is 27.2%, which is pretty good. I get an extra 27.2 damage increase by putting this unit on the team. If I were to consider, what if they already have 40% down? Should I add Pela? Should I let Pela do the ultimate on it? How much more damage can I do? And you see, it's kind of the similar. If we're considering, should we have this 40% extra defense down? Okay, that's still the change, but the final defense, it got reduced again, so it's actually down 80%, or the final defense is 0.2. Putting these numbers in, the ultimate 40% defense down actually gives you a 37.4 damage increase. So the defense shred on the second example is more useful than the first one. And if you're at the breakpoint of, hey, I could use this, or I could use this other one that gives me 30% damage increase, you would not want to do it in the first case because it only gives 27. But in the second case, it gives 37.4, which is even more. So you would pick it in the second case if we had a 40% defense reduction from a different source. From that example, we can answer questions like, if I add the resolution light cone, how much extra damage can I expect? How much extra damage can I get by superimposing this light cone? What about the damage increase when I get E5 Pela? Is that even worth it? How much do I get out of it? How much damage can I expect off the quantum set? Everyone talks about the defense shred there. Do I really have to get the third DOT to trigger the final 6% from the dot set? It may involve having another unit that may not synergize very well, but is it worth it? And very commonly, a signature light cone has some defense ignore. How much more damage will my DPS get out of it? Uh, these kind of questions really help you answer, is this worth the damage output? And it gives you a sense of scale for how to do it. So knowing the defense formula really helps with how this layout is happening, how much extra damage you can get out of it. And you can make your decisions based on it. But one problem is this formula is kind of hard. Uh, it's really weird to calculate because the denominator has like a couple ratios and you're dividing. So I actually came up with a couple approximations. First, if you consider, it's kind of like a shopping area where you have a list of sales. If you get to certain benchmarks, you get to use a different sale number. So uh, if you are in the 80% defense left, you have to use a 40% discount. So if you get 10% defense down, what does that contribute to your damage output? You use 40% off. So a 10% um, defense down, that gets you to 80% defense final. Well, that gets you a 6% damage output, 10 into 6. If I were to consider that, hey, I actually got a lot of defense down, and should I use this extra 10% defense down? The final defense was 56% left. Well, that's a little better. That 10% defense down, counted 30% off, would be 7% extra damage output. And you can see these approximations kind of scale as you go up. So you can kind of use this as an approximation, as a quick guide to figure out how much actual damage output you can produce as a result of it. So a good example is, I hear about Jinglu needs the quantum set. It's a really good option. If I consider, hey, uh, should I put the quantum set on my Jinglu? I don't know. It gives 10% defense down. Should I put it on? How much extra damage do I get by putting on the quantum set? Well, just using the quantum set as the only source of defense reduction, you get a 90% defense left. I think you're in this top sale area where that is a 40% off. So your 10% defense down corresponds to 6% damage output. Okay, what if you use the Palo ult, get an extra 40% down? Well, that's a little better. You are now down in this category, maybe closer to the 46% area. So we'll give you a 25% off. So if you use the quantum set after the Palo ult is done, your 10% defense reduction corresponds with a 7.5 damage increase. If you have the signature light cone, that's another 12%. So the amount of defense left they have is 38%. Well, that corresponds with 20% off. Okay, so my 10% damage reduction from the Genius set corresponds with an 8% damage increase. If I use the resolution light cone at S5, that's another 16% damage reduction. Defense reduction. What happens to the defense left? Well, it's 22%, which kind of is in this range, and I'll be using a 10% off. So using all four of these, would I want to use the quantum set? It looks like that quantum set gives 10% defense down. So that corresponds with 9% damage output increase. And if I actually compare it with the exact numbers, I'm only off on the order of 5%, if even. The first one especially because 90% is pretty far from the standard of 80%. So generally you can get pretty good variables just offhand, knowing these kind of ranges of how defense percent correlates with your damage output. So it really helps with predicting, hey, I want to add this defense shred. Is it worth it for this team? How much extra damage can I get out of it? And it really helps with theory crafting in a faster manner. So, final follow up, you know, what about if they are going into a quantum weak enemy? The quantum set gives you a 20% damage reduction. So, I encourage those of you who have looked into this, I leave the table up. What's the best way to calculate how much defense left, and approximately how much more damage output do you increase from the quantum set? So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm here for more Honkai Star Rail stats and going to go over a couple other topics as we go along. Thanks.